there's a sense of like, I take care of this because I can claim it, because I can own it. And from my perspective, I feel like that same sort of transactional ideology has bled into the way that people show up in relationships, where if somebody loves me, then I possess them, I own and can hoard all of their gifts for myself. And there's a sense of like transactionality with it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Melville Kashan, and today I'm with Sherika Tenaya. Sherika is a sex educator, a somatic sex educator, and sexological body worker. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for being with us today. Can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm a certified somatic sex educator and sexological body worker. I'm also a adjunct faculty member at the Institute for the Study of Somatic Sex Education. I'm an 800-hour registered yoga teacher, and I teach classes here in Boise, Idaho, where I live from, the unceded territory of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes. And I also facilitate group workshops and classes, both for the school that I teach at, as well as here in Boise. I have a private practice where I work with mostly individuals and occasionally couples. Um, and I also hold mentorship responsibilities at the school that I teach at. I come from a deeply religious background. I'm Native American and Mexican mixed blood. And I'm a member of the Southern Sierra Miwok Nation, Awanichi Grizzly Clan, and we are the original people of what's now colonially referred to as Yosemite National Park. I'm also a member of the LGBTQ community. I'm married to a woman named Monica, and we just celebrated our 12-year anniversary.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. Well, I'm so happy you're joining us today. And I had seen on your website you talk about decolonization and a role that plays in your practice. So, first of all, for anybody who doesn't understand, what is decolonization?
Decolonization is the practice of looking at one's life, looking at one's conditioned beliefs, biases, ideas, and looking at how the systems in which we are raised contribute to those beliefs and ideas, some of which might be true for us and some of which might not be. Recognizing that a lot of these systems benefit only certain people, and in fact can often have almost anti-human um, projections or ideas that can inhibit our ability to connect with each other and respect each other. So decolonizing is recognizing where you land within the spectrum of privilege, and empowerment or disempowerment in the body that you hold, and recognizing what's conditioned versus what is true for you, and realizing how colonization and all of its ripple effects has impacted so many layers of our society, but in particular, how we show up in the world and how we show up in connection with others or not. One of the ideas that came along with colonization that's very different from our culture as Native people is this concept of land ownership. For us, the land isn't a thing to be owned. It's actually a relation. We care for the land not because we own it, but because it's like we're caring for our mother. We're caring for a relative. Versus with colonization, this idea of land ownership, um, there's a sense of like, I take care of this because I can claim it, because I can own it. And from my perspective, I feel like that same sort of transactional ideology has bled into the way that people show up in relationships, where if somebody loves me, then I possess them, I own and can hoard all of their gifts for myself. And there's a sense of like transactionality with it, which can be really harmful in meaningful and deeply connective relationships. So seeing how that ownership correlation responds or corresponds with the overarching sense and how that has ripple effects in the way that we view love and what we should expect from love. That's just one example among several.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful explanation. It's not about controlling the other person. I control you, I own you, you're mine. I could see how that thought could bleed over into relationships.
Yeah, versus like when you love someone or something, you that love shows up in a way of like setting that person free. Even if there is a sense of cost or impact, negative impact on oneself, if you really love that person for who they are, not for what they do for you or what they make you feel, then there's a sense of like freedom that comes along with that. And it's not very widely supported, generally speaking.
Yeah, yeah. And so you are a somatic sex educator. So could you tell our audience a little bit, what does somatic mean? Like, what is that in front of sex educator? What does that mean?
So, somatic comes from a Greek word, soma, which means the body in its living wholeness. And from my perspective, it's this recognition that we have what I might call layers to our body. We have our physical body, we have our emotional body, our mental body, our energy body, and our spirit or witness body. And the idea is that what happens in one body has ripple effects in the others. So, for example, someone might have a emotional or spiritual issue that left untended can actually manifest as symptoms of a physical disease. And so, as a somatic practitioner, we can either lay hands on the body to track our way back to that spiritual or emotional root, or we can address the spiritual emotional root and thus clear those physical symptoms in the body. And really, it's also about learning how to inhabit one's body for very good reasons. In many of the cultures that we grow up in, we actually disconnect from our bodies as a form of protection mechanism, and it serves us in a lot of ways so that we can do the things we need to do in modern day world. But the body is rather than it being this machine that our mind is the conductor of, we are reframing that awareness and recognizing in somatics that the body has its own wisdom, its own intelligence, and its own memory that is distinct from that of the thinking mind and is also distinct from instinct. And that we can learn to feel what's happening in our body and then learn to speak outwardly in response to what we feel in our body and what we notice in our body. And in this way, we can interrupt our conditioned self. All the things that we were conditioned or imprinted with when we were young. If somebody makes an offer or request to me, my conditioned self might be like, oh, I need to do this because that's what, a good woman does, or that's what a helpful person does. And my conditioning will be like, yes, yes, yes. But my body might have a clench somewhere. Maybe my shoulders roll in. Maybe I stop breathing. And so while my mind is like, yes, this is a yes, the body's saying, actually, there's something here that no, there's a no here. And we teach people in somatics, we have this thing in somatic sex education that we call the sacred pause, where before responding to any sort of request or offer or suggestion, to take that sacred pause and just notice, how does the body respond? And giving it that space and time. And that little space and time, I find, can oftentimes be just enough for me to identify, oh, what my mind is saying yes, my body's saying no to. And in that moment, I have a choice of, do I want to do this pattern that I've learned? Is it serving me today? Maybe it is. Maybe I choose that. Or maybe I choose to reorient towards a different neural pathway, a different way of being. And so I find that that somatic awareness, that connection to my somatic self is really helpful to parse what is me, who am I really, what does sex look like to me, what does pleasure look like to me, what's really important in those things versus what I was taught to think is important. So it can be a really powerful way of returning to the self and recognizing how that's different than what you might be taught.
Oh, I love that so much. And I think, especially as a woman, sometimes we are conditioned from a very young age to want to please others or to want to serve others. And so when people ask us, hey, can you volunteer for this? Could you take on this extra thing? Could you be at this place? Instinctively, we want to say, yes, 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 yes. I want to make you happy. I want to serve you. I want to do something great for you. And we don't pay attention to like the anxiety or like the physical symptoms or things that it causes us. And then in the long run, we end up overwhelmed and upset and start having more physical and mental ailments, and it can cause a lot of problems. So I love the way you explain that.
Yeah, it's hugely important, and also the recognition in regards to trauma, where these experiences that we have can actually get stuck in our tissues, and it is the body needs to express what's stuck or discharge whatever was stuck in there, and it's through the body that that needs to be expelled, moved, expressed using various somatic tools like breath or voice or movement. That too is a big piece of how we work with people.
Yeah. And so, in the sexual health space and sex education, there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. So, what is like a common myth or misconception that you've encountered, and how do you address that?
One of the main misconceptions or myths, really, there's a lot around pleasure, where, like, for example, if a lot of people have this idea that to be a good lover, I need to give pleasure to someone else. And that's what makes me either a great lover or not. And pleasure there's two types of pleasure that exist. There might be more, but two types I'm going to focus on right now. And one form is direct pleasure. And that's where, if I'm like, let's say I'm petting my dog Arlo, and I'm feeling the softness of his fur and the warmth of his body, and the nerves in my hands are sending signals up through the nerve plexus to light the pleasure centers in my brain. That's direct pleasure. Then there's indirect pleasure, where same thing, I'm petting Arlo and he's making his little cooing sounds, he's wagging his tail, he's clearly enjoying it, and I see and hear and perceive his enjoyment, and that, independent of this, lights up those same pleasure centers in my brain.
Yeah, yeah.
And both are important. One isn't more valuable than the other, but because of some of these ideas that we have of like, oh, I'm a giver, or my partner comes before me, which is a really beautiful intention and a really wonderful, generous way to look at things. However, it can be, people can get a little too far lodged in that indirect pleasure camp,
Mm.
and it can actually create disconnection, where if I'm in an intimate moment with someone and I'm focused on trying to elicit a response from them or get them to some goal, like an orgasm, for example, then I'm in my head and I'm strategizing what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And the moment that I'm in my head strategizing, I'm actually disconnected from my own body's responses and that direct pleasure, that ability to receive through my own skin. And some people even get so far lodged that they're only about receive or only about giving, and they actually have a really difficult time receiving. And to this can create issues like performing. If I know that my partner really only gets off if I get off, then I might feel pressured to perform my pleasure in an inauthentic way because I know that they need that. Right. So, and then the other piece is it can take me out of actually connecting with my body and the body in front of me because I'm busy trying to strategize or make a thing happen. So, being able to connect with my own body's pleasure is not selfish, isn't me taking up too much space. It's actually giving my partner the opportunity, the gift of giving back to me and me actually receiving that pleasure. And also this concept of like someone else can give me pleasure. We really teach people to recognize that pleasure is something that we all allow and something that we all have a responsibility towards knowing what brings us pleasure, what doesn't bring us pleasure, what we like, what we don't like, and expecting someone else to know how to do that if I myself don't know is pretty unfair. And instead of like projecting my pleasure outward on someone else and just hoping that they'll know what to do, taking the responsibility of actually connecting with this body and seeing how long does my pleasure process actually take and what sort of strokes actually get me there. And then can I communicate that to someone else so that they're not trying to guess and wonder.
Yeah.
So that is one of the common misconceptions I come across a lot. Oh, my partner gives me an orgasm, or it's all about the giving. So it's an important piece, but it's not the whole story.
Yeah, yeah. And that communication part you mentioned is so important because if you don't communicate those things, people are not mind readers and they do not instinctively know. And so developing that skill and learning how to communicate with your partner is so important.
Absolutely. And it can be so fraught, right? Because one of the other things that comes with cultural conditioning is like my sexual prowess is my identity. And some genders have that a little bit harder than others. And so giving corrective feedback can feel really deflating to someone who identifies in that way. So being able to receive slight correction or a little bit of enhancement or feedback without taking it personally and letting it derail the correct connection of the moment is also something people really need to relearn or unlearn.
Yeah, yeah. So, Sharika will be one of our presenters at our event happening April 12th and 13th. It's called Sex Education, Coaching, and Program Development. It's an online exceptional weekend. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about at this event?
Of course, we're going to be bringing in the piece around somatics and the intersection of somatics and trauma science, and what it is, what our scope of practice is in working with that, and what our scope of practice is not in working with that. Um, we will be talking about how we use specific somatic tools um, to help our clients first experience a sense of safety in their own body and cultivate that sense of safety. And then feeling how, through the body, what their desires are, what their limits are, and how their somatic self shapes around those things. Um, and then how to form new neural pathways from what we were conditioned towards orienting towards what we actually like and what is actually pleasurable for us and what we actually want out of sex and intimate moments. Um, Something else that we might touch on as well is how we work with sexual health and healing from a pleasure-centered perspective. And and additionally, we do some group facilitation as well, that where we do a lot of really intimate things. So it's possible that we might also talk about what it looks like to facilitate or things to be aware of when facilitating group containers so that they're trauma informed, so that they're people have empowered voice and choice, so that they're racially sensitive pieces around that might also be brought up.
Yeah, I think it's going to be so fascinating. And for anyone who's never been to one of our online weekend events, these events are very engaging. So you get to ask questions, you get to interact with the presenters and other participants. We do breakout rooms. So it's a really great atmosphere. So we hope you can join us. All right. And can you leave us with one takeaway or tip for our audience?
Hmm. I would say I just want to leave you with the sense that pleasure is not something that is a fleeting state to try and achieve or chase. It's not indulgent and it's not something that you earn. That rather, pleasure is incredibly vital to our healing process. And we actually have a pleasure system because that is what helps keep us resourced for all of the crap in life.
Mm.
And that learning to tolerate, actually learning to tolerate what feels good in your body, what feels right in your body, and letting that sense of pleasure and rightness and wholeness be as big as it can be, and really savoring that, that is oftentimes what healing looks like, learning to tolerate that sense of goodness and honor it. Um, and and recognizing how important being able to access pleasure is for creating a resilient system and resilience in a body that can do hard things and get through it.
Oh, what a great takeaway. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, if anybody is interested in getting tickets to this online event, it is open to all. You can get your tickets at sexualhealthalliance.com. We will also have the link in the description below. And if you enjoy this type of content, please like our video and subscribe to Sexual Health Alliance's YouTube channel. We would love to have you here with us. So thank you again, Sharika, for joining us today. We are really looking forward to seeing you at the April event.
All right. Thanks so much.